I have now the pleasure to introduce Professor Hans Rosling. You are a professor in global health and at the Karolinska Institute. I have read that you are one of the top 100 people of influence in the world. That is really something. And I have also read another place that you are a man who are able to make statistics and facts fun. So I'm really looking forward to listen to you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. I was asked to end this fantastic opening with half an hour of statistics. And that half hour ended 20 minutes ago. So now I'm going to break the Alfred Hitchcock rule. Alfred Hitchcock had a rule. He said a film can never be more than 2 hours because the variation of size of the urinary bladder does not allow people to be together for a longer time. So if someone needs to leave the room silently to come back, please don't feel embarrassed to do that. Here we are, half an hour of statistics. What could be better to start with than about how many children there are in the world? When I was born in 1948, we were less than 1 billion children in the world. Today, it's almost 2 billion. And one of these 3 lines is the projection from the United Nations Population Division of the number of children in the world during the rest of this century. Now be careful. Demographers is the only discipline that can tell you something about the future. The highly skilled United Nations Population Division has never been more than 10% wrong for their 40 years projection. So what do you think it is? Do you think the number of children will continue to grow to 4 billion?
No.
Do you think it will slow off a little and be 3 billion? Or do you think the number of children have already stopped growing and there will be only 2 billion? Can I have a hand? How many think 4 billion? Hand up. How many think 3 billion? How many think it has stopped growing and will only be 2 billion? Thank you very much. I have to continue the lecture, I see. You are wrong. I thought I could have released you had you answered correctly. Yeah? So, what is it we see? Let's start with the number of people in the world. I divided the world even more simplistic. I put North and South America together. I split it up the Middle East to Africa, Asia, and America, and I made the Australians and the New Zealand Asians. Get used to it. And we are 7 billion people in the world. Where do they live? Let's see if this conference is in equity with the distribution of people in the world, or whether we are facing inequity just from the start. There are 1 billion people in the Americas, there are 1 billion people in Europe, 1 billion in Africa, and 1, 2, 3, 4 in Asia. It's an Asian world. We have a severe underrepresentation of Asia here, a severe overrepresentation of Europe. Yes, if we're aware with it, it's okay. That's how their life is. Huh? Now, the interesting thing is by 2050, we will be 2 billion more. Where will they live? Well, there will be 1 billion more in Africa, and there will be 1 billion more in Asia. Asia will grow with 25%, Africa will grow with 100%. And this is according to United Nations Population Division mid-estimate. Can be more, can be less. But this is the mid-estimate. And by the end of this century, the estimate is 1 more billion in Africa. This is more or less where we think the population growth of the world planet will stop. Now, how can it be like this? What is it that determines where people come from? Huh? I think you know this. It's babies per woman. Do we have 2? Do we have 4? Do we have 6 or 8 babies per woman? And how many of these children die before the age of 5 years? 100, 200, or 300? 300 means 1 child in 3. This is 1961, the time when the world finally, after so much colonial oppression, got independent nation, most of them. And then you could see that we had all these countries here These were what called themselves developed countries. They had benefited from colonization. They had 2 to 3 children per woman. They had very low child mortality. And here were the developing countries. They had 5 to 7 children per woman and a child mortality that ranged all the way up to 1/3 of the children dying. This is China, this is India. The size of the bubbles is the size of the population, and the color here is the continents. Here it's a little more divided. The green are the Middle East, the dark blue is Africa, light blue here, South Asia, East Asia, and the brown here is Europe, and this is the Americas. This is, of course, Japan there. Now, what has happened? Has the world become more equal? Has child mortality decreased? Have family size decreased? Let me show what's happened. Because this is basic data from United Nations gathered from countries in the best way you can do it. And we'll have the play down here. Has child mortality come down? Has family size come down? Ready, steady, go! Can you see 62, 63, 64? Child mortality is falling. Look at family planning in China. They go all the way to 2-child family, and India is following. Latin America is following. And the Arab countries are also following. The green ones here. And here comes Bangladesh. Bangladesh track. But this is Pakistan. Bangladesh is already there. This is what has happened. A complete change of the world. We used to be up there, and now we are down here. Let me just show you some examples. If we go back to the 1960s, and I catch France down there. Just France down there. And then heroic Tunisia, which we so much have admired over the last years. What has happened to Tunisia? Have they managed to come closer to France? Let us see. Let us see. The race between France and Tunisia. Here we go. Tunisia indeed get lower child mortality, and they start the family planning. And the France never would see them. They never thought they would come here. Here they start to decrease the child mortality, and they're almost on par. Isn't it fantastic? A complete transformation we have seen of the world. And if you look at the world today, you will indeed find countries like Ghana in Africa, already here on 4 children per woman. Tanzania there, relatively low child mortality, but still 5.5 children per woman. Now there's one problem with this, because I show country averages. And sometimes differences within countries can indeed be very wide. So let me move back here and let me show you what it can be in countries. But first, the background. In the past, we were living up there. We used to get per couple, father and mother. No, modern people would say that I'm heteronormative now and I don't know the diversity of families, but I'm aware of it. You know, you're in Stockholm, so you always have to clear that. I know there are other types of families, you know? but here we are. I'm pretty basic, I'm pretty down to earth. The father and mother used to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 children. Still today in the rainforest and some places in the world we have 6 children. Why didn't the population grow there? This was 200 years ago. It should have tripled in 1 generation, from 2 to 6. Because 1, 2, 3, 4 sadly died before they grew up to become parents themselves. This is what we call the old balance. It was death that kept control of population. Very, very sad. And now what we want is the new balance. Father and mother on average get 2 children. We don't want the government to interfere and tell each family how many to get, but on average we get a new balance here. No child deaths. We hate to see our children die. Nothing more terrible can happen to them. And here in the middle, that's where we have the fast growth. In countries today, like Afghanistan, behind their Congo, countries in war, there we have the fastest population growth. The fastest population growth in the world is today in the countries with highest mortality, because a dead child is replaced, and with no security in the family. Even if you provide family planning, they'll say, no, we'll wait until we see that the kids are safe. So we really need a social safety for having it happen. But most countries are down here. In fact, 80% of mankind is down there. And let me show you Ghana there. If I split Ghana into its wealth quintile, the 20% richest, next 20%, all the way to the 20% poorest, this is what Ghana is. Look what the difference within Ghana. 20% most educated with a decent salary, they are here together with the rest of the world. Then here, whereas the worst off in Ghana are almost like Afghanistan, within one successful African country. And I split Tanzania, and you see almost the same variation. The best of 20% in Tanzania are like the second quintile in Ghana, and then Tanzania has almost 60% of the population there, but it's not worse than it is in Ghana when it is at its worst. We have to look at sub-national data also. Country averages are always dangerous to compare. That's one of the most biggest weakness of Millennium Development Goals, that we just compare country averages. We have to look at it. But you can never get a very, very good country average if you don't have taken care of your last quintile and the poorest also in the society. Now, how would this be if we go on and look what it is? This is the right answer. The number of the children in the world have stopped growing, and this elite audience doesn't know it. This is a problem. This is a problem because we discuss the world, we have feelings and emotion about the world, but we don't know how it is. That's why I made a career by simple statistics and make it understandable. The normal families in the world look like this today. Catholics in Mexico building their home, 2-child families. Muslims in Bangladesh on a rickshaw bike, fighting hard and working hard to get these 2 daughters into a better life than they had. Hindus in India, the most common family is a 2-child family in India, average 2.5 in India. And the Buddhists in Vietnam already on a 2-wheeler towards the future. 80% of mankind is on 2-child families. So we have an inequity here that some are worse off and they are delaying this. Look here. If I show you here, income here. This is money. In fact, I love money. Why do I love money? I come from the Department of Public Health. We know how to use it. That's why we should love money. If we get more money, we can even use it better. Be careful about saying that money is not important. It's really important. The number of representatives in this room is directly proportional from each country to the gross national product per capita of that country. That is what defines this Congress, who are here and who are not here. So you can have $300 per capita, you can have $3,000 per capita, you can have $30,000 per capita. The difference is 2 zeros, that fantastic innovation of India, the zero. It's the most important on the paycheck, isn't it? You look at your paycheck, how many zeros does it have? Huh? That determines how your life will be. This was 1960, the Western world, the developed world, the industrialized world, whatever you call it, they were here. They were quite rich, they had 2-child family, the rest were up here, and look what happened. Could you decrease number of children per woman? That is, could you decrease child mortality? Because you saw first child mortality down, then family size down. Did you have to have the money first, or could we make the social transformation first? It's quite interesting. Huh? Maybe you are wrong, maybe you are right. Huh? Here's the fact. Here we go. Can you see? Across the incomes, they come down. Mighty China here. India is following. Look at Bangladesh. They've come down with quite a low income. And then they start to move fast. Did you see China here? Huh? How do you get rich today? Do you do as US in the past? United States in the past? They first got rich, and then they got less children. But China went right down, and then they could invest in these children, and they got richer. Healthy first, then rich. This is the new way to wealth in the world. We need the critical social investment very early in the country's growth, but those are critical social investments for everyone. Here we have China today. And I would like to show you also how this is if I take away these countries. Look, two-child families all the way here to $3,000–4,000 per capita, and then it goes up here. And can you see the clear limit between the developed and the developing countries?
No.
No, there is no one. It's just the mental thing here that are developed and developing countries. It's no such thing any longer. Is it here the limit, perhaps there? Is this the limit between developed and developing countries? And then on one side here, you have the Czech Republic, and on the other side, you have the Slovak Republic. Just because they split, otherwise it wouldn't be the gap here. Today we have a continuous variation between the countries of the world. There is no such thing as a division in two types of countries. There are countries all the way. Look at mighty Brazil here. Brazil, we heard that the 5 last years have been very difficult times. Yes, for the richest countries. Because there was a president in the United States who shot himself in the foot on Wall Street and started this crisis. This was a financial crisis starting in the richest countries. Africa have never had so fast economic and social progress as during the last 10 years. If you say that the last 5 to 10 years were the most difficult, it shows from where you come. It shows from where you come. And Brazil is presently doing quite well. You know how much Brazil is lending to the United States? The last 5 years, every year, Brazil lends $30 billion to the United States to keep the country afloat. It is the same as the entire budget of USA. It's Lula and Dilma who pays USA. We have to be grateful for it. And I'm very astonished that some countries still give development aid to Brazil. I actually advised the Norwegian government to do that, to give the money directly to Washington instead, to cut the And who is the country that builds the HIV drug factory in Africa now? It's Brazil who does that. Who is the country who gave more food to Somalia than a number of West European countries together? It's Brazil. And I could mention China, I could mention a lot of things. And there are a lot of views about this, talking about land grabbings and so on in the richest country, because these countries ain't used that these countries are so capable. And you cannot talk about one floor here in all these countries up to Congo. Because Congo have $387 per person a year. That's $1 per person per day. And then it's inequity within Congo, so you can imagine. If Congo would use the Swedish poverty measure, which is the median, 60% of the median income is poverty line. At that line you would starve to death in Congo, because you can't use it. What the richest countries use are relative poverty. Down here, they use absolute poverty, 125. And that's something you should discuss and be very clear of. Nothing wrong with it as long as we understand it. Nothing wrong with it that we want to decrease inequity. But we must understand, and for those of you who read the Bible, I advise you to read Matthew 6:11. It's the only line I read in the Bible. It's so good. Our daily bread give us today, it says. And that's 125 per day. So we really have to understand that it's the worst of countries here, mostly sub-Saharan Africa, but also Afghanistan, also Yemen, also Iraq, of course, but Guatemala, Haiti, Tajikistan, and here Papua New Guinea. These are the countries with biggest concern. The middle-income countries, where most of the world population live, they are doing quite fine. But of course, social inequity is a constant demand in those countries. But we heard now the UN representative talking about Argentina. Because Argentina has $15,700. You can put the floor quite high there. You have to be aware of the GDP per capita, and this is purchasing power GDP. Had I taken exchange rate GDP, it would be much lower for the poor when it comes to importing things from outside. Now, This is the boring result of a boring study from relatively boring people. This is Swedish people. I had the possibility last year, instead of just asking the Swedish people what they feel about development aid, you always ask the rich people what they feel about the world. I've started to ask them what they know about the world instead. So we asked them, what is the percentage of 20-year-old in Tanzania that can read? Is it 20, 40, 60 or 80%? How many kids are there per woman in Bangladesh? 5.5, 4.5, 3.5 or 2.5? How long do the Vietnamese live? 45, 55, 65 or 75 years? Fairly straightforward answers. You should have a good chance even if you guess to pick the right answer. This is the right answer. 80% can read in Tanzania, 2.5 kids in Bangladesh, and the Vietnamese live an amazing 75 years in spite of their low income. It's very much due to social equity. This is what the Swedes answer. You know, the Swedes only have 5% correct answer. So I went to the zoo and asked the chimps, and they had 25%. I mean, the problem here is not ignorance. The problem is not ignorance. It's actively wrong idea about the world. The Swedes think the world is as it was 45 years old. 25 years old. It's an active idea. So this is probably because these countries have advanced socially without advancing economically, and we keep judging people according to money. We keep judging them according to money. And they are very advanced people now. You can find highly trained in Tanzania, Bangladesh and Vietnam, although there still is poverty in these countries. Severe poverty in the case of Tanzania. So this is more or less what I would like to emphasize here. Now, let me here move this on. And I would like to show you this country of Sweden, 1890. That's when my grandmother was born. Then Sweden had a child mortality of 178. Here I've used the scale, so I compressed the high child mortality and I expanded the low child mortality, just as I did with the income. It's called logarithmic scale. You hated it when you did math in school. I call it a rubber scale. You know? I mean, I take apart the low incomes, I put the rich incomes together. And let's see what Sweden did then in child mortality, if you start up there. It's quite interesting. And the other countries will follow as soon as they have data. Sweden was quite equitable. It had relatively low child mortality here in relation to other countries like Germany and Spain in relation to the income. We had early schooling in this country, early literacy. And it went down like this, and now the other countries are coming. And at the end, Sweden was very surprised that the little red country beated us. We got very embarrassed. Singapore beated us. And Japan are just here behind us like this. They beat us on life expectancy because they don't drink as much vodka as we do, so we can never beat. But on child mortality, we still perform relatively good. But the interesting thing here, look, the Swedish trend was on the high side, although at the time we had equity. Why can now almost all countries produce a lower child mortality in relation to the income? Because we have more knowledge. We know the importance of literacy. We know the importance of breastfeeding, and we have the technology, industrialized produced soap that is relatively cheap. We have vaccine, we have antibiotics. We can indeed get more health out of the buck today. And it's really the skill we must have to be able to do that. Now, how are countries doing here? Look at Bangladesh there. Bangladesh are there. And if I take Bangladesh backwards, they're doing quite well. Do you see any sign of a crisis the last years? No. The crisis is over here. You see the bubble go backwards here. These are the ones who have the crisis, which they call global. That's why they go to Brazil and borrow money to keep afloat. And these ones are doing relatively well, although there are harsh conditions and changes there also. And even Bangladesh is doing well here. Now let me once more split Bangladesh, or let me go and look into this a little more carefully. Oh, sorry, that one I jumped over. I came the wrong way into this. Now I have to do it like this. Let me see if this will work. Normally you get very nervous at this, but it happens often for me, so I got used to it. There we are. You see the Swedish line? Sweden had an annual rate of reduction of child mortality of 3.4% per year. You know the Millennium Development Goal is 4.3. Sweden was off track the whole time. The wrong thing with the Millennium Development Goal was they were set at the South Korea rate. And then it was as if the rich country wanted poorer countries to be off track. And say, oh, they didn't achieve Millennium Development. When in fact they do. There's a cruel thing with Millennium Development Goal. They measure from 1990 to 2050. 25 years. Not even Stalin had 25 years planning periods. If you look at the countries how they are performing the last 10 years, it's quite well. Twice as many countries are performing Millennium Development Goal rate, and even faster, if you just look at the last 10 years. And here, Sweden had an annual rate of growth of the economy of 2.3%. So when I lecture in the corporate sector, and they want to know which countries to invest in, I say invest in countries that both have economic growth and decreasing child mortality. Because then something truly are happening in the country. And they have a falling fertility rate in the upper quintile. Because today, with all the knowledge we have, social development should be able to precede economic growth, and then economic growth will also be so much faster. That's the lesson from the Asian tigers. Because they got what's called the demographic dividend. When you get 2 children per family, then you can afford better schooling, and then you can really get that economic growth and then continue to use it socially. So when people ask me, what do you want, social equity or economic growth? And I answer, yes. Because I want both. Exactly. Because one helps the other and the other helps the other. There's no contradiction. There's no contradiction. And how much can you go before? Well, look at this again. Look at it here. We have child mortality and we have income. This I call the maximum equity line. You can't go beyond beneath this. If you have $1,000, you can't go lower than Bangladesh. If you have 2,500, you can't go lower than Vietnam. And which are the countries which is below? It's Cuba. It's a very special case, you know. And up there I have North Korea on the line. There is no way you can get healthier kids if you don't have more money. But it's terrible that you don't go down to that line. So there's another line here which I call the maximum inequity. The shame line. And it goes from United States down here all the way up to Nigeria there, which is not distributing effectively the oil money, but progressing. So this is more or less where countries progress. This is South Africa, it's due to the HIV epidemic they are here. More or less this is where you go. And there's no idea trying to pass this, because then you end up in a North Korean situation or a Pol Pot situation where you didn't want to be. You have to accept that you can only improve to a certain level. You can only have a certain level of the social floor according to your income of the country. And if you try to bypass that, you destroy the economic growth. Now, Tanzania is doing like this. They're doing very fine. They have an annual rate of reduction of 4.9%, faster than Sweden ever did. And they have an economic growth of 4.2%. I never thought I would live to this year, when sub-Saharan Africa have an economic growth of 5% on average, and the European Union has 0.3. Africa is on catch-up with Europe. Welcome.
Hear, hear.
This is where Tanzania will move. And they are already quite equitable. They have to have economic growth. There's no way. And that economic growth had continuously to be used for better social situation. 25 years they can be there, 50 years they can be down. Look at Bangladesh. I split them here so you can see where they are. This is the upper quintile in Bangladesh. Yes, they are a little ahead. This is the others, these are the other three. Of course, these have to follow. Don't let these split too much, then you won't move fast. But don't think that you can keep the entire population together and march like Pol Pot like this on the rice field. That won't work. You have to allow a certain inequity, but more inequity you can allow in the economic dimension, not in the social dimension. Everyone to school, everyone for basic health service, everyone for basic human rights. This is very important. There you cannot have inequity, but you have to accept a certain inequity in the economic growth. Many talk about the CSR. Have you heard about CSR? Corporate social responsibility. I have another acronym I like much more. It's TAX. Tax. And build institutions that take care of everyone, not haphazardly. But don't think you can tax, don't think that the poor countries can just solve their problems by taxing the rich. There are not so many rich and are not so very rich. They have to have true economic growth coming down here. And here it's technology that puts a line where Singapore cannot come lower than this. This is more or less where we will be. And let me end now by showing you what this will mean for population growth. This is what I jumped before. So now I will try to come back to this one here. Yes, it worked. Huh? This is Africa today. Why will Africa grow? Well, Africa had 400 million children between 0 and 50. 300 million. Here the doll now is 100 million, 1/10 of what I showed before. 300 million here between 15 and 30, 200 here, and 100 here. There are so few in my age group, 60 plus up there, so they don't even qualify for a doll. This is what will happen in Africa. They will grow up, and if, by a chance, Africa will have child mortality down very fast, and from of tonight get 2 children per woman, these one will replace themselves, won't they? What will then happen when I know what my future looks like? I will die, like this one. They always die. Either you die when you are very young or you die when you are old. Very few die in between. And here, many think this terrible HIV epidemic, other diseases. Mortality is always very low between 5 to 10 years and up to 60 years. Across the world. They grow up, they get their kids, then they all die. They grow up, they get their kids, then they all die, and they grow up and they get the kids. From the day you get 2-child families, it takes 70 years until the population stops growing. They have to fill up. This is what has not been understood. You think that there are more and more children in the world because the population keeps growing, but this is the world. This is the most demanding graph here. This is the Europeans. Europeans from 0 to 15, 50 to, it's a boring place, Europe. Look, same amount of people all the way. America almost as boring, Africa very dynamic, and Asia have a lot of old people to fill up, but the number of children have stopped growing in Asia. They stopped growing in Asia. And what will happen here is, of course, you saw it before, the old will die, and the rest grow up, and then they get their children, which will not increase. But 1 Asian child will be replaced by 1 African. The schools are being converted to gyms in China today. The number of children are decreasing at the same time as they are filling up, because the transition was so fast. Look, the old die, the rest grow up, and then they get it. It's pretty easy, isn't it? The 3 things you do: you get born, you grow up, and you die. You die, you grow up, and you get kids. And you grow up, and you get kids. And that's 2085. Then world population can stop growing, more or less. This is a prediction. It can be faster, can be slower. But this is just a fill-up. 2.5 billion is just because those already born will grow up and live their life. The old people are exaggerating. They have so much power, they keep talking about themselves all the time. Europe will not get an aging population due to longer life expectancy. They will get an older population because they get so few children. So the percentage of old will increase. That is the problem with the social protection scheme in Europe. The shrink is this. Asia will shrink, Africa will grow. If Africa reduced the child mortality even faster, if it continues like the last successful year, if social equity follows, everyone get into the school, you can have less African here. And I just lectured to the ministers of finance and health in Africa and gave them 2 options. Either you are becoming many and wealthy, or you are becoming very many and poor. Because what makes sense for countries makes sense for families. You don't have to force anyone about family planning. Just make it accessible to families and let them decide themselves. This is the world we are going to get. The aging one up there is not the issues. We had economic problem because the rich cannot take care of themselves any longer. The politicians in the rich country borrow money to win the elections. And then they have to go and borrow from China, Saudi Arabia and Brazil. That can't continue. They have to learn the lesson. We have to think about the entire world, and the inequity has to decrease within countries, but we can't do it more than the economic growth allows. Most of the people in the world need economic growth, and had I had another half hour, I would say green economic growth. Because now the rich countries think that they can solve the climate crisis by the poor sitting with a little solar electricity lamp, you know, playing a flute under a green tree. You know? This is not what will happen. Everyone wants washing machine. Damn it! Everyone here, here wash your sheets or your trousers. You use washing machines or have someone to use it for you. Everyone wants that standard in the world. That's the vision I meet in African scholar and elite and planners, from corporate sector to social sector. That's what I see in Asia. This is what is going to happen, and the rich have better adapt to the new world and don't give $250 billion in agricultural subsidy when it can be used better to decrease social inequity, improve world development, and get green technology moving. Thank you very much. Is freely available on gapminder.org. We took it from London Underground. Mind the Gap, they said. We thought it was a good idea. Gapminder.org, you have everything free.
Well, you see why we thought it was a good idea to finish with Hans. He has told us that our world is changing. In many ways, we can be more optimistic. But there are also big challenges, and our agenda is speaking about those issues. So thank you very much indeed, Hans Rosling. Well, it is almost the time to finish, but you would like to hear a